Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video. Today I want to talk about Jitoless again. I haven't talked about it in a long time and had some changes and also some updates with new cards that I wanted to talk to you about for a while and figured I'll finally get to it. Okay, so first of all, the deck is the most aggressive deck in the game and still one of the best ladder decks in general, and one of the best, if not the best, aggro deck in the game ultimately. It is severely rivaled by Skycrack in my stats win percentage wise, but Jitoless still has 1 to 2% higher win rate so far for me, but I don't have purely new data, so might be in a current field that aggro just generally struggles a bit more, and Skycrack and Jitoless are pretty close to even. Although it also feels like Jitoless is a bit more powerful and harder to stop than Skycrack in general, so I can see Jitoless just being a bit better. The deck is a hyper-aggressive aggro deck focusing heavily on 1-drops. You guys all know that by now. I've made a fair share of videos about the deck. So let's just talk about the card choices. So we have 21 drops, basically the 20 best options. 4 Drone, 4 Knifejack, 4 Oni Ronin, 4 Pyroknight, 4 Ruthless Stranger. For the longest time actually, between the last video and this one, I ran Taking Grenadin, because before we got Cinder Yeti I also had Shadowlands Guide, and I eventually figured out through testing that Taking Grenadin, Shadowlands Guide solves a bunch of the closing issues of the deck, and a lot of the time Taking Grenadin was played so late that it at that point dealt more damage than a Ruthless Stranger would have, so making it most of the time actually increase your damage output rather than decrease it for being a 1-1. So that is something that's not super intuitive and obvious, but you think about it more and try it some, it makes sense. But I think now with Cinder Yeti, Ruthless Stranger most likely is better again with the blocker impairment of Cinder Yeti and no Shadowlands Guide to recure Taking Grenadins. So then we have the only 2-drop, Instigator, simply because it's just too good, and there is a fair share of units that trade with our units, all the Temple Scribes, Friendly Wisps, Amber Acolytes, opposing small units in aggro mirrors, artisans. There's so many 1 and 2 health units that trade with our units that Instigator can deal a ton of extra damage. Also it's a 3-3, so it attacks into more boards than our other units, and also stalls some stuff in aggro mirrors. It's very relevant, and multi-Instigator draws are really powerful, and also Instigator makes our removal and combat tricks also deal some extra damage. And the trigger is particularly powerful with, say, Bandit Queen and the opponent being forced to jump block to not die. One note here, Jido is still terrible even though people play it again, and a list with 4 Jido even won an ETS weekly once randomly. The card is just bad and not worth running in my opinion. It's just so underpowered and overcosted. The card was like just good enough in my opinion before it was nerfed. I even already questioned it multiple times when the card still cost 1, simply because it was not always great. It was sometimes lackluster and pretty bad and low impact. Sure, it gave you more explosiveness, but it also gave you more potential to have like weak and underpowered draws as well. So it was kind of a two-edged sword to begin with, and now that it costs 2, it's just crap. And these lists basically play Jido over Instigator, which I think is just so wrong on so many levels. Aside from your like nut draws, Jido is terrible, and Instigator is basically always great. Nut draw or average draw or whatever. So really no reason to run that. And the other card that people run that I ran in the beginning and have long given up on is Lurking Sangua. Card is just not very good. Turns on opposing Vanquishers. gives you more potential for bad hands, because if you have a hand light on 1-drops and the opponent interacts with you, can be really hard, especially without Jido, or even with Jido, as Jido now costing 2, makes it a lot harder and takes a lot longer to get Sangua out, multiple Sanguas, cripple your draws, yada yada yada. The card is basically win more, lose more. Like, if you're doing well, you're doing even better with Sangua. If you're not doing so well, Sangua make things worse. And in the spirit of consistency and improving the weaknesses of a deck, adding a card that pronounces your weaknesses and strengths in both directions doesn't really help the deck a lot, especially given that your good draws already are good enough to crush most decks and most draws. So all this deck needs is help when it's not going so well, not a card that makes it even better when it's going well, because when it's going well, the deck is unstoppable. So stop putting cards in the deck that make it better when it's already winning. Alright, then we have the 3-drops for assembly line still, just cornerstone of the deck. And I replaced the Shadowlands guide with the new Cinder Yeti, because Cinder Yeti fits the more aggressive style of the deck better. I had a fair share of cases where I just had to play a Shadowlands guide on turn 3 with no target, and just being like a crappy 3-power 3-1, while this is a 3-power 3-2 Overwhelm, which has nice synergy with Rally and Rapid Shot and sometimes Bandit Queen. Also the warp means it also has the potential to be a 2-for-1, and then of course there's the summon trigger that virtually deals, like, say, 2 extra damage to the opponent, or and saves a unit. So like, we exhaust the big blocker, another 2-power attacker most likely will get through, and also 1 unit less will die than normally. So that's generating a lot of virtual value and pressure there as well. Just a really powerful card, the perfect addition for the deck, exactly what the deck would have wanted. If it was a wanting or missing anything, that's probably the card. And then we have for Bandit Queen, just very powerful, particularly in aggro mirrors, where the quick draw basically means your team is only jump blockable, and jump blocking or not blocking mostly amounts to the same situation in aggro mirrors, especially when you're like kind of on even footing and then you drop a queen. It just wins you the game. And it's also obviously a source of charge, and like, again, after sweepers or for like surprise kills and so on. Just a powerful card that gives the deck also more consistency between Bandit Queen and Rally. And then, yeah, to the spells, we have 4 Torch, 4 Rapid Shot still. Torch just being super efficient and flexible, kills opponents, kills blockers, does everything we want, kills rally weapons. Rapid Shot, basically a universal removal that deals with almost all blockers indiscriminately, and if there is no blocker, deals 4 damage to the opponent to kill them. So also basically never dead. And then the mentioned Rally, additional Bandit Queen that can be better or worse, depending on scenario and board state, but most importantly gives you additional redundancy between the two, because having only 4 payoff cards to go wide is not quite enough to make it worth it, but having 8 makes it super worth it, and is where the power of the deck comes from. And then last but not least, we have to Suffocate, because there's like 2 slots left basically after all the essentials, and Suffocate is just, when it's good, it's great. It's very power efficient, generates a lot of tempo, and answers a lot of problematic units, be it other instigators, students, Cathans, Champion of Glory, or all the 3-drops with more than 3 healths, Seraph, Combre Healer, Bloodcaster, even some 4-drops, Steward, Maiden. A lot of cards that you see a fair share of, and also in aggro mirrors it's fairly efficient. And yeah, in a deck like this that mostly cares about the first 3 or 4 turns of the game, and by that point usually is either so far ahead that it doesn't really matter what the opponent is dropping in terms of units afterwards, or so stalled out that a single removal more often than not won't help either. And also we have Rapid Shot for like stuff that Suffocate can't kill. So yeah, Suffocate just makes the deck a bit more resilient and consistent at dealing with 2 and 3 drops that might eat a blocker, might eat an attacker each turn and kind of bring the deck to a grinding halt or wear it down. So I felt that's important, especially with the release of cards like Cthulhu. But even before that. And it's just like hyper efficient, which is exactly what the deck wants. Alright, and then we have 25 power, leaning towards red heavily, because most of the 1-drops are red. Bandit Queen is double red. The deck definitely works better on mono red than in mono shadow. And yeah, 8-5 on the sigils, 12 duels, just your typical distribution for a deck leaning heavier to one color than another. Alright, that's the decklist. Basically, to sum up the updates, Cinder Yeti replaced Shadowlands guide, and compared to the last video, I quite some time ago got rid of the one-off Jito that I had for a while and just went with 4 Rally for Bandit Queen for like more consistency. And there was a tech in between that kind of became abandoned again, which was taking Grenadin over Ruthless Stranger. Feel free to try it, like I'm not 100% sure that Ruthless Stranger is definitely better with Cinder Yeti, but it makes more sense and it also felt a bit better to me so far, because I tried taking Grenadin a bit and I had a fair share of draws where I wished it was just a Stranger, because I had to play like taking Grenadin on 1 or 2 where I'd rather have a Ruthless Stranger. And yeah, Cinder Yeti lets you get more damage out of cards like Stranger compared to before, and some of the Grenadin upside is gone without the guide. But yeah, keep that in mind, feel free to try that. And in terms of matchups, the deck is just very well rounded. Honestly, I think the only deck I ever had like a negative record on ladder against used to be like Praxis Tokens, which is not a deck currently played really. And all other matchups were a bit above 50% or even 60-70%. The deck has just been performing brutally over the like 400 plus games that I have tracked, and the other hundreds or thousands of games that I played that I didn't track or used to track but have lost the data on when I changed my tracking sheet and stuff. So yeah, the deck is just a powerful ladder monster that is hard to shut down and doesn't suffer from any major weaknesses. It's also important to note that a seemingly bad matchup like Felon is actually at least even, maybe even slightly favorable, because basically you can beat Lightning Storm, but they cannot beat you without Lightning Storm. So you will win almost every time, basically every time they don't have a Lightning Storm, and some of the time they have a Lightning Storm. So they will only win like maybe 70-80% of the games they have 1 or more Lightning Storms, and lose everything else. So that doesn't sound very favorable, and also not really 50%. It sounds, and also based on my stats, is below 50% for Felon. Like I'm like between 50 and 55% or something in a matchup, I would say. And feels pretty representative, because the matchup is so lopsided and so dependent on that one card, and that one card doing enough in conjunction with all the other cards to actually win, because they need basically Lightning Storm plus a few specific other things like blockers to make sure that they can bring you to a grinding halt and take over the game. Alright, that's it for the deck tech. As usual, gonna hop into some games, show it in action again, the latest version, to show you how it plays out and how to pilot it. Stay tuned for the first half of the games coming up in a moment.